Good morning and welcome to Tulane University. It is my pleasure to introduce our our next session, the Mid-Transition Moment, Oil, Gas, and the Realities of the Road to 2050. If time allows, at the end of the session, the panel will take questions submitted by the audience. To submit a question, please scan the QR code to my left, located on the screen. Please be sure to silence your cell phones. Enjoy the conversation and join me in giving a warm welcome to our moderator, Randall Ebner.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. We're going to have hopefully a very engaging discussion, and we look forward to your questions at the end of our fireside chat this morning. Alan, welcome.
Thank you.
Like me, you're a proud Tulane graduate. Could you tell the audience a little about how you got to Tulane and how it prepared you for a phenomenal career in the oil and gas business?
So I grew up in Shreveport, Louisiana, and my father went here, MBA 73, so looked around. New Orleans really sold the university. Coming to school in New Orleans was just an amazing experience and something we wanted to look forward to. And when I got here, it didn't disappoint. And then I came here as a poli-sci major. I was going to be a lawyer. I'm glad I fixed that.
Not afraid of places?
No. When I did poli-sci for a year, realized that oil and gas was probably my future. My father was in it. He was looking to do some things out in California, and the opportunity was there, and made the switch, and so glad I did.
You mentioned California. I think of the song California Dreaming a lot. It seems almost contrarian when I think about our industry, having lived the early part of my career on various mega issues in California, that a company like the one your family has continues to operate and be a major player in California. Why don't you give a little background on the company and how it found its way into California? DCOR is the name of the company.
The DCOR started over 20 years ago, and it was an opportunity as the majors and everybody was fleeing California due to the regulatory nature and the market, and took advantage of some relationships and knew that was kind of a contrarian play, but it was pragmatic, cash flowed, and made sense. So we went out there, and the one thing we learned quickly was we're not in Louisiana anymore, and you can't run it like Texas or Gulf of Mexico, and we kept our head low. We worked with our regulators, and we've been able to survive and grow to the largest offshore operator in the Pacific OCS as a result.
And what type of production portfolio does DCOR have?
Primarily oil. We do make some natural gas, but we do about 10,000 barrels a day. We also have oilfield service side where we operate and abandon assets for the majors as they have had to come back in for various reasons and bankruptcy. So it's an interesting place to do that business, and the portfolio has allowed us to expand and grow as others kind of don't want to be there anymore.
Well, when I think about California Dreaming, I think about when I was a kid watching Bob Hope promote Texaco from offshore platforms, offshore California. And here we are today. Bob Hope, one of America's greatest prizes, one of the most beloved people in our country, supporting and really advocating for the oil and gas industry in California, including offshore. How did we get to where we are today?
So California exists because of oil and gas. It was a hub of oil and gas along with Texas and Alaska. It was the number 3 oil producer in the country up until 2012. So the fact that now oil has turned into a villain out there is a little hypocritical because that state uses the most oil in the country as well. So I think the reality that oil's going away is now coming back around. I think they understand that they need oil. There was a big push to villainize the industry for a long time, and I think it's coming back around as a necessity for the continued economic growth. I mean, the 4th largest GDP in the world, and it's really driven by oil and gas.
Well, again, reverting to my childhood, one of the things I loved doing was photography. I loved buying my Kodak cameras, my Kodak film, taking them to be developed at Walgreens or here in New Orleans at Katz and Best office. Some of you might remember K&B. In the prior administration, go back 12 months or beyond, a lot of the advocacy from that administration was that the oil and gas industry is the next Kodak. Will the current generation in decades to come look back when they would go to the gasoline station and fill up their car with gasoline and basically analogize that our industry, in fact, became next Kodak?
No, I mean, I think there's a desire by activists and environmental groups that oil and gas is going to go away. But, to quote Billy Bob Thornton in The Landman, I mean, our biggest concern is that we're going to run out of it before we find a true replacement. And when you look at the transportation sector, I mean, it's almost still all run by oil and gas: aviation, military, petrochemicals, cement manufacturing, steel. I mean, everything this country thrives on is pushed by oil and gas. And I know there's some great technology and we're moving in the right direction. But oil and gas is a necessity that we're going to have. I mean, California, we produce about 300,000 barrels a day, and we use about 1.7 million barrels a day. We import over 70% of our oil. And if you turned every vehicle in California on the road today to an EV, you would still need to import oil into California to survive.
Well, as Tip O'Neill once said, all politics are local. When I look at the governor in California, Newsom, obviously he has been pushing for the 2035 electrification mandate in the state for all light motor vehicles, for the entire fleet. Yet we now have the announcement of refineries shutting down in California. And all of a sudden you see the policy that's been advocated by the governor perhaps reversing itself. Explain what's happening in that regard.
So from an oil perspective, California is an island. There's no pipelines coming into California. So we are completely dependent on our own refinery. We have 9 refineries currently right now. One of them is closing down next month, and that's the Phillips 66 in Wilmington. And then Valero has given notice up north that they will be shutting down. That's 20% of our oil refining capability. And nothing scares a politician more than getting fired with $8 gas. And that's the reality that kind of hit Newsom and even a lot of the environmental legislators. And they need to marry the affordability and reliability with their clean emission standards that they're pushing. And I think that reality has created a 180 in the political thinking out there, that we have got to have this mid-transition moment where oil and gas is oil specifically. Oil and gas are two different streams in California. Oil runs the transportation. Natural gas, we do have pipelines in, but the El Paso line that comes out of Arizona is controlled by Texas. And when Texas needs gas, they'll shut it down, and natural gas will shoot to $52 an MCF in a month. So we have energy security issues at California that everyone needs to address, and now the reality is really setting in, because the inability to refine enough gas to fill cars, it's easy to say we can all go to EVs, but for single moms and people working jobs and the tens of thousands of people who work in the industry, it would just cripple the economy in California.
Well, with that reality now setting itself across the landscape, are we really at a midterm transition when it comes to the future of the industry, or are we still at the very infancy as market reality has been overtaking the policies and the politics?
Depends on where you are and what your definition of mid-transition is. The mid-transition, oil and gas is declining, and EV sales and emerging markets are increasing. So if that's your definition in California, we're in a mid-transition. In reality, can we hit 90% EV sales by 2035? Probably not. Can you hit net zero by 2045? I think it's a great goal, but I don't think that's a reality. So are we in mid? Are we in front of mid? We'll see. I mean, history will have to tell us that. I mean, we tried to phase out coal starting in the 1920s, and we peaked with coal usage in the United States in 2007, and we haven't peaked internationally. So I think it's easy to set goals that are lofty, and I think reality starts really setting in as you get towards those dates.
You've told me in some of our early discussions preparing for this fireside chat this morning that you and your company has to deal with 26 different regulatory agencies, be it at the state side, the federal side, the local side. How do you manage that?
You make it your job to manage it. And, we are the most regulated. The offshore Pacific OCS is the most regulated barrel of oil in the world. California produces the cleanest barrel of oil in the world. So then you got to ask the question, why don't you want to produce in California? And it's a little bit of hypocrisy, because whether you get it from Ecuador or you get it from Saudi Arabia, that's just, they don't have the same standards we do. Now, how do you manage the regulatory agencies? You make it an art. You make it your job, because you can't do much about price. Your production is pretty steady out there. The regulatory environment and the legislative environment are really what are going to affect you, and you've got to be a good partner. And you got to bring everybody under the tent, and you got to make everybody feel involved and involve them, and also be very good at what you do. When you're good at what you do, the regulators and the regulations solve themselves. But when you run afoul of that, and that's why there's not many operators out there, that you cannot run afoul of the regulators in California.
Well, as you look into the future, the crystal ball, would California and beyond be better served with less regulation, obviously important regulation, to still meet the balanced necessity of the dual challenge of meeting society's demands for hydrocarbons, doing it in an environmentally responsible manner, but would we be better served as a society with more focused regulation, less competition, ego clashes amongst regulators?
When you have 26 regulatory bodies, there's just inefficiency, right? So yes, obviously less regulation or just less agencies to regulate the same thing, I think would serve the consumer, and you'd see a market impact if you could solve a little bit of, solve all of the inefficiencies with multiple regulators.
You foresee that potential happening down the road?
Absolutely not. No chance. No chance. I anticipate there's going to be more market share grab from regulators, whether it's the Coastal Commission, CalGEM. Bessie and Boehm are pretty good, but the California local, they're just jockeying for more positions.
With the change in the administration in Washington, have you seen a change of the relationship between the federal regulators in California, offshore in particular, and the state regulatory agencies, or is there a constant clash?
No, at the local level and at the district levels, the regulators are really good. They're career, they're professional, they know their job, they work well together with the state and their counterparts in the state. From an administration level, we typically get treated like a football, especially with the Trump administration. California's just a punching bag, so that just gets locals fired up. So we end up with a little bit more backlash from the state and local level, where the federal side, they may be more amenable to permitting and stuff like that. The backlash we feel from the state and local side is pretty significant.
Well, again, let's look at it from a pragmatic perspective. You get permits to explore and produce more oil offshore on federal leases. Then you have to get those production barrels to market logistically onshore in California. So now you have to turn to the state regulators and even the local or county regulators. How is that tension going to play out?
As long as you operate in a responsible manner, they're pretty good. Where we do see a little bit of an overreach is they get frustrated when they don't have any regulatory approval on the federal OCS. So the only thing they can do is to try to regulate, restrict, and obstruct any type of permits on the state side. Historically, it's not been that big of an issue. We've been out there since the 60s. Everybody's accepted that these are here to stay till they're done. There won't be any new ones, and we'll just operate with these. Now with some other political headwinds that oil and gas has seen out there, from a new entrant, the restarting of SYU, or just the administration being so adversarial to the state of California, you are starting to see legislative attempts to try to obstruct projects in the OCS by restricting access in the state level.
And clearly, I know your company has faced mandatory decommissioning of operations. In fact, one happened recently over this past summer, your platform, Esther. I'd like to read to you some of the comments you made about that, how that really sets the table, perhaps, for a future reality to avoid similar circumstances down the road. And this was from August of this year, just last month. I joined a small group of DCOR personnel on platform Esther to witness her final moments of operation. At exactly 3:00 p.m., we pressed the ESD on the production deck, and one by one, the sounds of compressors and pumps faded until the platform fell silent. A profound and bittersweet moment in California's energy industry. For over half a century, Esther stood off the coast of Orange County, first installed in the early 1960s as one of California's iconic man-made oil islands. She blended into the horizon while quietly producing oil and gas, surviving storms, and later being rebuilt in 1985 into the platform we know today. More than just steel and pilings, Esther was a proving ground for innovation, a dependable asset, and a source of pride for the men and women who worked safely on the decks of this platform. While she has now been permanently shut in, her legacy remains, a testament to the ingenuity, resilience, and dedication that has defined California's offshore industry for generations. Litigation prematurely ended the production of Esther, which would have an estimated 15 more years of operational life. Is this a microcosm, not only for California, but beyond?
So a little history about the offshore platforms. There's only 27 offshore platforms in California, so they all have a story, and they all have history, and everybody has a role to play, has had a role to play on these. So when you shut down a platform in California, it's an emotional thing. And the group that we were out there with, and Joe Chase was out there with me when we shut her down, it's an emotional thing. That one instance of Esther shutting down, that was a settlement of litigation with the state of California, and it was a settlement in order to get another platform restarted. And it was you had to give up something to get something, and the prize on the restarting of another platform that had a pipeline issue was greater in this case. We haven't seen platforms removed off of California since the 90s. So there will be a effort going forward by state and environmental activists to try to find ways to shut in platforms. And there is a handful of them to it, and we as an industry need to find creative ways to work with them to keep the platforms on that are economic and make sense to keep on, and come up with a sensible solution to abandonment going forward.
That leads to a follow-up question regarding traditional oil and gas development on state lands in California. What's your foresight, be it San Joaquin Valley, some of the old oil fields that come out of LAX, see some of those old oil wells pumping and so forth? Is there a future, Wilmington and other places?
So yes and no. So you brought up two different things. The urban environment oil fields are probably, they're just going to dwindle with the existing wells that they have. Over the last 2 years, there's been a big push legislatively to stop oil drilling. And you look at Kern County, where, Kern County, if it was its own state in 2012, would be the 5th largest oil producing state in the nation. So a lot of oil, and they were issuing about 2,000 to 2,500 drilling permits a year in Kern County alone. And that went down to 25 in 2023 and 20 in 2024. So as this whole renewal of thinking in oil and gas at the legislature, there is a big push to unleash Kern County. So everybody is focusing to Kern County to try to deliver domestic production for California and really let the urban sites kind of dwindle away.
What does that mean for fracking? I remember when I was still practicing, there were some proactive attempts to bring fracking into California, especially in the valley. Where does that stand today?
So regulatorily, they have effectively ended fracking a couple of years ago. Obviously, they haven't been issuing any drilling permits, so it just really wasn't a topic. In the latest legislation that came out on Wednesday that's unleashing Kern County, that's one of the gives the industry gave, is to take fracking off the table in the state of California. So well stimulation is specifically restricted in the latest bill. Assuming it's going to pass this weekend, that will effectively end all fracking in the state of California.
Well, we spent the first part of our discussion focusing on California. Let's go beyond California as we look to the midterm and beyond over the next 20, 25 years. Is California really the precedent setter that it loves to be? What's going to happen not only here in the United States, be it onshore, offshore, but also globally?
So California should be the leader in transition and climate change, and however, it's quickly turning into a cautionary tale of what not to do. And I think this whole mid-transition idea is what's going to come out of California, and I think that model can be an effective model internationally and domestically in the U.S. as recognize oil and gas's role to get us through the transition and to where we want to go in net zero at 2045, 2055, wherever that's going to occur. Oil and gas is going to have a a substantial role and is going to be the vehicle that is going to get us to that transition. It does not need to be the hindrance to that transition.
Well, in that regard, going back 12 months, one of the key topics was ESG. As we sit here today, obviously there's been a change in attitude in Washington and maybe beyond, and also within the investment community, be it the passive funds, you all know who they are, and others. What has been your interaction and your perspective on ESG? Let me give you another comment before we turn to your response. From my perspective, ESG is nothing new, never has been new. If you go back to 1970, when the National Environmental Protection Act came into law, it was Richard Nixon who introduced it. So that was, 55 years ago. So the environmental landscape, the regulatory landscape, the responsibility of companies, small, big, and large, to meet environmental regulations has always been on the table for decades. As far as sustainability and sociability, industry, be it here in the U.S., be it the state level, local level, internationally, has always been focused on helping create new employment opportunities, educate people, and be, good neighbors within the communities. And of course, governance, for those of us who are lawyers, we know going all the way back to the Great Depression and thereafter, the securities laws have been in existence since, almost 100 years ago. So ESG truly is nothing new. It became this acronym that all of a sudden got this special focus. As we sit here today, as I mentioned, it seems like there's kind of a pullback, not necessarily on responsible operatorship and meeting ESG perspectives, as most companies like yours and others have done throughout their existence. But is that term starting to kind of fade away into the sunset?
Yes, it is. It is starting to fade. I'm going to answer this two ways, because when ESG came to the forefront 5-8 years ago, from a producer standpoint, California was doing all of this 20 years ago. This was nothing new. I think Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, I think the operators probably had to make some changes to abide by the new ESG regime. So from a producer in California, this was nothing. We electrified most of our rigs back in early 2000s and compressors. From a third, from the outside looking in, where we saw ESG really start affecting us is in the insurance market and in the capital markets, where you see banks just not lending to oil and gas. And the bigger entities and the publicly traded entities, they could still get investment banks to lend, but from an independent producer standpoint, the market basically dried up. We were very blessed during this downturn that the capital downturn, that we didn't have debt and we had a pretty strong balance sheet, so we were able to weather it. Now you're starting to see that turn around. We also, Lloyd's writes all of our insurance, so I have to go to London every year and meet with underwriters. And during the ESG period, you did see a significant pullback in underwriters that willing to write oil and gas. And we are starting to see that market open considerably, because honestly the returns, greed drives capitalism, and the returns in the insurance market from oil and gas are pretty significant.
So a lot of our discussion is, I think, highlighting what is becoming more and more to the forefront, the importance of still recognizing how markets and economics really help dictate the current and future landscape. Yes, there's policy and politics, but when it comes to reality, meeting society's needs responsibly, meeting demand, increasing supply, economics and markets still play a critical role. Is that true?
Absolutely, and that's what you see. I mean, whether you see activist investors for Exxon and such, like, there is the reality and the fiduciaries of the entities and to our nation is that we have to provide clean, reliable energy to really, for society to continue to grow and for our economy to continue to be the #1 economy and drive forward.
I assume you would acknowledge there's still room for the renewable landscape, be it wind,
Absolutely,
solar, and so forth.
Yeah, no, there's a role to play for everybody, and I think that I was having this conversation in 2004 with George Kaiser, and it's every bit of renewable alternative energy is going to have to be brought to the forefront and play its percentage role to really get to where we want to go in 2050.
With the common denominator being really market demand, economics, acknowledging all the above when it comes to future energy supply, how do you, in your planning, with sudden shifts in administrations and policies and so forth, have a long-term vision of how you make your investments and so forth?
Well, we have to put a lot of the noise behind us and depend on, it's some faith. You got to believe that there's not going to be some major upheaval in policy or legislative agendas that are really going to affect you. We're seeing a lot of our capital being drilled, going into drilling, which is kind of your standard, but we're also going into, we're building a large solar plant to power our facilities. We're looking into microturbines. We're investing capital from a facility standpoint that we know is going to survive the test of time. We're not buying IC-driven, compressors or pumps or rigs. We know that they need to be electric, and we're preparing to the realities of the increasing energy costs out there, electricity costs, but also the fact that, air emissions and the air pollution control districts are going to probably just get stronger, and we're going to have to make those capital calls that kind of go towards them and the regulatory environment we see forward.
I think this highlights also the preeminence and the importance of technology and the continuing advancement of technology. Is that an important part of your landscape as well?
Absolutely. Technology, becoming more efficient is the answer. Getting better at what we do, and technology is a big driver of that. At the end of the day, we drill wells and the bit turns to the right and the bit turns to the left. That technology has never changed. But how do we find it? How do we get there? How do we get more efficient? How do we get more efficient with our people? California from a labor perspective, that is a big concern. And how do we get the right people out there, and how do we have them operate efficiently, and how do those facilities need to operate efficiently? Technology, automation, all those things will drive how we operate going forward.
When I was involved in California for a good 15-year period earlier in my career, I had a full head of hair.
I used to have all dark hair.
What keeps you up at night? Given that you are, your company, your family company is a contrarian, having a long-term footprint in this environment that is not the Bob Hope environment I alluded to earlier, but one that has been, and hopefully it is turning the corner of market reality, anti-industry.
I get this question a lot, and I think the answer that's the most realistic is that there's going to be an event outside my control with another operator or another industry peer that negatively comes back to us. And if you look at, the two big oil spills that have happened in California over the past 20 years, one's Plains All-American, which was an onshore pipeline that leaked into the water that we cleaned up, and then Amplify's pipeline spill in San Pedro Bay down in Long Beach, and that was a cargo vessel that picked up the pipeline with an anchor and spun around and effectively broke it. And that we have had negative impacts on that. It had nothing to do with us, but the negative impacts we see as a result of others' actions or something outside our control, that's what keeps me up at night.
You have independent operators like yourself from other parts of the U.S. or even globally confer with you to benchmark on how you've been able to be so successful in such an environment?
To some degree, when they want to come out to California, definitely. And the ones that do, I think, we've been able to be successful out there by being different. And if you want to come to California, and I think you see a CRC or a Chevron that are successful out there, they operate California like California. And it is when somebody does come out there, or there is an attempt to see higher regulations go in other places, we do get conferred. And it's a pretty good dialogue, and I think people find it shocking that we operate the way we do and how we have to operate out in California.
In the last 24 months, it's been an industry consolidation wave similar to a couple of decades ago. What's your vision on the next 25 years regarding future consolidation within the industry?
I think consolidation is going to continue. I think it's going to be a lot of good opportunities for small independents that want to pick up non-core assets as a result of the consolidation. So I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity out there, but consolidation, efficiency, I think that's going to drive the industry for the next 25 years and try to become more efficient in certain basins. And I see it, whether it's the Permian or whether it's California, and I think that's where the consolidation is going to occur.
In that regard, what do you foresee as the mix between crude oil and natural gas, and the importance of natural gas, which is being highlighted as part of the future landscape for data centers and other demands beyond the traditional demands that we all knew about historically?
And I think it's they're very different. And I think that the demands on natural gas are going to be very significant. as a result of the grid. I mean, that's going to drive the demand for natural gas, and that's where places like Louisiana and Texas are going to be very competitive in data centers. I think there's not a chance that the data center is going to be out there. It's just too expensive. Electricity is too expensive, and it's too hard to operate. From a crude perspective, transportation is going to drive that one. And everybody wants to talk about, personal vehicles, but then, trucking, shipping, aviation. I just think that that's going to be the driver for crude for a long time. And that's going to be a big hill to climb for new technologies to try to overtake oil and crude in those specific industries.
As an independent, do you see CCUS playing a key role in meeting that balance between supply and demand and operating responsibly from an environmental perspective?
We're not that involved with it. I would assume that California should be at the forefront of it. They've only issued one permit. CRC's trying desperately to get carbon capture brought out to California. And at this point, I don't see the big role. I'm not affected by it, and I don't see opportunities for it yet. Clearly, it's got a role, and it'll grow as we go forward, but it's just not something that we have on our radar very much in California.
Living in California as you do, when you talk to just the general population, what's their reaction, their attitude about today's industry?
It's a mixed bag. And the lifelong California people who have looked at the platforms and seen the pumping units on Beverly Hills High School or in Inglewood or off of LAX, it's a part of the landscape, and it's just a part of the environment. And everybody knows somebody that works in the industry because it's tens of thousands of jobs. So mostly it's accepted and it's appreciated. The activist side will give you this view that it is all deemed evil or it needs to all go away today, and that's not what we feel on the ground out there. And I think that it's an accepted part of kind of the California history.
You've spent your whole career in the industry with your family company, been through many cycles like all of us. Tell us about how you managed the down cycle, how you learn from the down cycle and take advantage of opportunities.
So I've got a great mentor, my father, who has been through multiple down cycles, and he instilled on me that you have to be ready for the down cycle. You have to be ready to take the opportunity of a down cycle and be places where others aren't, and to be successful. And we've been able to do that in multiple downtimes. Even COVID, we were hiring during COVID and we were buying during COVID because we had a balance sheet that allowed us to do that. And whether you go back to 14, where that down cycle, we were hedged through that. We risk mitigate our pricing, and we were ready for those down cycles, and we were able to take advantage of opportunities. And that's how you survive in the oil and gas. You prepare for the down cycle and don't think it's going to stay at $120 for the rest of your life.
Global geopolitics clearly play a key role in our industry, always have and will continue to. Even though you're in this so-called isolated island of California, how does geopolitical developments around the world, be it Europe, Middle East, Asia,
clearly
even Washington, impact your local business?
It's all price. I mean, it's geopolitics affect price, and price directly affects our business. And that is one of the biggest concerns, talk about things you can't control. And, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Saudi, Iran, I mean, all these things, even though we're not directly tied to those markets, it is something that drives our price, and it is a very frustrating element of our business.
If you were sitting in Brussels right now, going back to a question I asked of the panel last year, taking all the lessons you've learned dealing with California, the feds, and so forth, what would you be advising the ministries there that oversee the oil and gas business as they plan their future?
And this would be energy across the board, is don't rush into something that's not fully ready to transition to. And I think that's where you even look at Germany and their pullback from nuclear and going back. I mean, you have these cautionary tale after cautionary tale that this doesn't work. You've got to be fully engaged in your next energy source before you kill or try to kill the other one. And you're also not going to regulate it by regulating the supply. California's been trying to regulate the supply side of climate change for a decade and 2 decades, and that's where we are today. You address the demand side, and the supply side will take care of itself. And I think everybody's still going, we're going to cut off nuclear, we're going to cut off oil and gas, and the demand's still there. Everybody still needs power, everybody still needs to drive their car.
What about coal as another example?
I mean, coal, great example. I mean, they're still internationally building coal plants, and domestically, and we wouldn't have had the big shale boom of natural gas in the early 2000s, we would still be on coal. And we are blessed to have a natural gas supply that can run us and honestly the rest of the world, and we've got to take advantage of that.
Both of us have been blessed to spend our entire careers within this wonderful industry. Looking at some of the younger people here in the audience today, what would be your advice to them as they hopefully will navigate to the energy landscape?
So, this has changed over the last couple of years, but you got to be versatile these days. Energy industry, no matter which one you go to, is problem solving. We are always solving a problem. That's what makes it exciting. That's what makes people get excited to go to work. You're always solving a problem. So going in, being critical thinkers, and being able to address problems and having a full gambit of experience or education to understand the commercial impacts, some level of engineering, some level of operations, where you can go make good decisions and be a problem solver and be pragmatic and really drive results for a company. The days of being an engineer and just being an engineer and going through, or being a finance person and staying in the majors and just staying siloed, I think those are done.
I'm confident, as I've said in the past, our industry, especially here in the U.S., has been around over 150 years. It will still be here. It's resilient in 150 years from now.
I think there will be some form of oil and gas still here in 150 years.
Before we turn to some questions from the audience, I also want to acknowledge the key role the Templeton family has played here at Tulane and continues to play in helping to meet this future of our industry, helping to educate young people, helping us to realize how important markets, business, economics are, besides policy. It was just announced within the last day or two that the Templeton family has given a major gift to the business school and has renamed the trading center to help plan for the future. So I really wanted to acknowledge and thank you and the rest of your family for your leadership. As a proud Tulane alum, I'm sure there are others, future generations of Tulane. You guys have really set a wonderful example for all of us, so thank you.
Thank you.
With that, let me turn for questions from the audience.
What do you see as the long-term U.S. and global demand and price for oil as more of the world transitions to less emissions?
Well, if I knew the price of oil in the future, I wouldn't be sitting up here, I'll tell you that.
If I was his lawyer, I'd tell him not to respond to it.
I'll take, from a crude perspective, I think demand will remain stable internationally for a long time. I don't see a huge demand rise. Also, don't see a dramatic decline. I think regionally you could see a demand decline, like California, but I think globally it's just not. I think it's going to stay stable, and it's even at the U.S. I think we are at a level that is sustainable for a fairly long time.
And do you think companies can survive? Let's say oil gets down to $50 or below. Going back to the consolidation question, I assume that's part of what could drive to future consolidation, as has taken place in the past.
And you bring up a very good point. As price declines, supply is going to decline, and then price is going to go back up. I mean, it's just supply and demand economics 101. So yes, I think in this mid-tier, kind of, I call it the mid-range, because oil's been 140 before, and it's been 16 or negative for COVID. This $60, $70 range is a healthy range for both the consumer and for the producer to hold these levels at very sustainable level.
Another question?
Solar and other renewable technologies are outcompeting and displacing oil and gas across the globe. Where do you see the use case for oil in the future?
I'm not sure. Oil's transportation. I mean, you're not seeing solar and renewables really drive crude. You may be talking about natural gas, but the demand for natural gas, or energy in general, electricity, is going up. So you are seeing a significant demand increase so renewables are going to fill the void, but from a base load perspective, natural gas and your traditional hydrocarbons are the base load, and they are the reliable side of the electricity needs. So solar in California produces 35% of provides 35% of electricity to the grid. Wind is about 7%. Wind's not near as efficient, and then nuclear is about 7%. And then you have about 40% that's natural gas. And those peaker plants are left online because of the reliability that natural gas provides. So, I do see an increased role in solar. I think that to some degree wind. I think solar is much more efficient and probably going to see a greater future. But it is, oil and gas are not going to go away as a result of wind and solar.
I think this kind of relates again to this reality that the governor out there is now realizing that for the general population, the voters, let's be frank about it, they don't want to have brownouts. They want to have a reliable, consistent, seamless supply of energy to live their lives.
And that is, electricity, our costs in California are double what the national average is. And our fuel is 50 to 70% more than the national average. So I think the reliability and the affordability side of oil and gas will keep it around for a while.
But at the same time, as we've been discussing, as the question poses, there is a reality. It's going to be more than just oil and gas. It's going to be an all the above.
Oh, absolutely. And I think
you said earlier.
I think nuclear is going to see a big resilience. A big revival. It's just we need the power now. Whether you talk about AI or you talk about EVs or the electricity is the grid and the grid reliability and security is just going to be paramount moving forward. So however you get there is going to serve society.
Another question, please.
Are there other regions of the U.S. where the expertise of DCOR being able to operate in California so well could be leveraged to add value where other companies would struggle?
Yes. We get approached multiple times a year by people with needs or companies that our reputation, our ability to operate in California removes a lot of barriers to entry. So, you look at the Gulf of Mexico or Gulf of America, you look at, some of these harder, more regulated areas. Yes, DCOR has the reputation and the ability to go into these basins that would prove to be difficult for a lot of independents. So we are in growth mode. We are, we are committed to California, but we don't. If there's an opportunity in another location or another basin, we would take that opportunity and leverage what we've done in California to operate efficiently and effectively in the Gulf of America.
I think bottom line, DCOR will be around for the long term.
Yes, we'll be there till the end, and we will be around for the long term for sure.
Another question, please.
How are consolidation efforts throughout oil and gas creating new opportunities?
I think from an independent perspective, I think the consolidation is going to create a lot of acquisition opportunities for independents. As big mergers happen, non-core assets are going to be sold, and I think that's going to provide an opportunity because the independents come in, and you look at some of these bigger, majors doing these large acquisitions, and the efficiency level of a major is just not there what an independent can do. So these later life assets, they're going to be prime opportunities for independents to come in and operate it better, operate it more efficiently, operate it cost conscious and effectively. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities come out of these consolidations.
I think you raise a great point because there's always this assumption or presumption that it's only the majors that create best practices in the oil patch, but it's really a two-way street.
They definitely create a lot of best practices, especially on the safety side, safety and environmental. We definitely look up to them, and we take a lot of the things and lessons learned the hard way a lot of times. But from an efficiency standpoint, the majors, and Exxon needs a Guyana to be successful. And they can't take a 1,000-barrel-a-day field or a 2,000-barrel-a-day field in Kern County and make that effective.
Another question, please.
Given the extended period of recent high-quality oil and gas production without major incident, is there a shift in acceptance in the last decade for oil and gas operations?
I'm not sure there's a shift of acceptance. I think that I like that we talk about the safety record because it's a testament to how serious the industry takes. The worst thing that could ever happen to an oil company is not a price dip or a facility going online. It's an oil spill. It's an environmental disaster. If you go to look, Macondo nearly took down BP, Valdez, Exxon, and those are the major events that affect oil and gas. So the testament that we have had a safety record, that's just we have to do that business. And I think the thing that's going to be driving the general acceptance of oil and gas is going to be market-driven. Now, if the industry has multiple major incidents, clearly that's going to put a negative downturn to the image and perception of oil and gas. But it's our job to do this safe and effectively, and we take that job very seriously.
I think it's also really important to acknowledge that, like any industry, the oil and gas industry is made of people. And who are the best ambassadors for the industry? It's the people who work in the industry, working with our neighbors and so forth. And it's really our responsibility, in my mind, to be those who are educating, like in a forum like this, which is so wonderful that Tulane is undertaking in these past 2 years, to help educate and create a balance of knowledge, factually based, objectively based, as to all the above when it comes to this industry, not only for today, tomorrow, but for the long term. And with that, let's all give a big round of applause for Alan and the success his company's had in California.
Thanks, Randall. Appreciate it, buddy. Hey, Brandy.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you all for joining us for this session. Our next session in this space will be at 1:10 p.m., Aligning Policy, Practice, and Property in Carbon Sequestration.